Recording in progress.
The meeting is now being recorded. The live stream will begin when the chairman calls the meeting to order.
Good morning. The clock is at 9 o'clock. All 5 commissioners are in attendance. So at this time, I call to order the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners special meeting on the budget for March 30th, 2022. At this time, I'd ask you to all please turn off your electronic devices and also ask Commissioner Ingalls to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Ingalls. Public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker unless additional time is granted by the board chairperson. The Board of County Commissioners uses timing lights to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. You'll see a green light when you begin and then a yellow light which indicates you have 30 seconds left and should conclude your comments. Once the light turns red, we ask you to please resume your seat. In addition to opening public comment will also be taken on administrative agenda items that are identified for possible action, and then at the end with closing public comment. We only have one item on the agenda today, so we'll be taking public comment at the end of that. So at this time, public comment will be taken on those items within the jurisdiction and control of the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners. Is there any public comment here in chambers? Please go to the microphone, sign in, and state your name, please, for the record.
Good morning, everyone. I see we're in good form today. My name is Jason Garrett with the House of Gibson, returning home after 35 years from the Columbia River Gorge. My folks have passed, and we're here to take care of business. We noticed no public comments in the first few days of the budget meeting and thought we better get down here and have something good to say. So we got 3 minutes to get this out. Wow, the valley's changed a lot. The irrigation, the trees, the utility, it's fantastic. It's totally changed from the desert time that I know so well growing up in the ranchos. Went to elementary school, middle school, Douglas High School. Been back about a year now, and it's an entirely new perspective. Cutting right to the chase, we've got an important opportunity here to set the record straight when it comes to the allocation of resources. And we've got some utilities and some things to offer as we've been working on a new time small business revolution, which just took second in the nation in the Dalles, Oregon in 2020. And we're on the map in more ways than one. This is the Nevada Assembly, the People's Coalition for Justice, and the Foundation for the Law of Time, which makes conscious what's unconscious. We all took a pledge this morning. I'd like to know how many people actually know how many stripes are in that flag, which is 13. Like the seal of our nation, the 13 stars on this dollar that we love and worship so much, the 13 colonies, 13 disciples, the power of 13, which is the Natural Law Peace Initiative, obscured by a fiction and a fictitious standard of measure. Biggest complaint people have today is not having enough time or money. So we're locked into some kind of illusion programmed by a 12-month irregularity. It has no basis in science. That's your Gregorian calendar. That's the time is money economy. That's why people aren't here today. They don't have the time or money to participate in these meetings. They want to be here, but they can't be here. They're strapped to the debt of a deficit spending model that cannot be sustained any longer. That's why we're here, to offer alternative solutions that show that we can generate the funds and the revenues that we need without overextending our tax base any further and taxing us out of the valley, taxing us out of our homes. So that's what we're here to defend, and we're here to work with law enforcement today in introducing the law of time. And we are at lawoftime.org, if you care to think a link, and 13 months, 28days.info. That's the hottest peace movement on the planet today. Thank you, doctors Jose and Moideen Arguelles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Additional public comment? Not yet. We're still in public comment. Okay, seeing no other public comment in chambers, do we have public comment online, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marcia Johnson for the record. At this time, there's no public comment online.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Engels, you had a comment?
Well, I see Bobby Thompson is here, and I'd just like to ask her, what is avgas going for now per gallon?
Bobby Thompson, director of the Great Minden Tahoe Airport. Avgas is up at $6.35 a gallon, and jet is only slightly lower than that, and rising. I would have said an arm and a leg, but that's next week. Well, I'm here. I may take advantage of the time, if so allow me. Yesterday, you folks were inundated with a massive amount of information. I mean, Ms. Cartwright and Ms. Willoughby just did an amazing job providing you with just this mountain of numbers. Of course, I always remain laser focused on the airport. And as Commissioner Tarkanian was very correct in saying that the A in the PALS made for a really good acronym, I thought I might give you just a little history. At one time, your airport was very deficient in funds, and that's why the airport was part of that original PALS. But back when Steve Mokrahysky was county manager, and he had hired our firm to help with the airport, we got to the point where the airport was self-sustaining, and at the same time, you were about to really get serious about building that beautiful community center. And he said, we're going to take the airport out of PALS. You don't need it. And obviously, we did not. So that's when the A stayed, but the airport no longer received funds. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Okay, so we're done with public comment. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Motion by Commissioner Rice, seconded by Commissioner Engels to approve the agenda as presented. Sensing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. We'll go into the administrative agenda. It's the only agenda we have today is the administrative agenda, and it's one item. So I'm going to read that item into the agenda. And then after we have our presentations and discussion amongst the board, we'll go to public comment. And I think we are going to try to take some action today. Is that correct? Okay, so I thought so. Okay, so item one, and the only item for possible action, discussion to approve the fiscal year 2022-23 tentative budgets for all Douglas County and Douglas County Redevelopment Agency funds. Discussion may include a general overview of the Douglas County budget, including but not limited to presentations on the following: General Fund, all departments including supplemental requests; Special Revenue Funds including supplemental requests; Debt Service Funds; Enterprise Funds including supplemental requests; Internal Service Funds including supplemental requests; Capital Project Funds including supplemental requests; and Redevelopment Agency Funds. This is being presented by CFO Terry Willoughby and Financial Director. I'm really not sure of your title, but if that's a promotion or a demotion, I don't want to disrespect you, but Jenny McCarthy. Cartwright, I'm sorry. Cartwright. So I knew that. I don't know why I read it differently or said it differently. So anyways, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Terry Willoughby for the record. To follow up on a few items from yesterday, there was a question about the cash balance in the RDA 1. It's about 2.6 million. And I also provided copies of the executive summary of the actuarial studies that we discussed yesterday for the Risk Management Fund, self-funded workers' comp, for your reading pleasure later. And also, there was a question about the solid waste fund and whether that could be used for septic tanks. The solid waste fund is actually a franchise agreement with Douglas Disposal governing trash services, so that would not be the appropriate use of that fund. That would be something that the sewer fund would be responsible for. There are grants, however, for those types of items that we'll be looking at. And I do want to turn it over to Jenny for one clarification, and then I'm going to give some opening comments and turn it over to Mr. Cates.
Jenny Cartwright, for the record, Finance Manager. I did want to clarify and follow up on Commissioner Tarkanian's question yesterday about the supplemental requests in the Special Revenue Fund. I did say that those supplemental requests are all funded by Special Revenue. There are a couple of exceptions in the Special Revenue Funds where if we have supplemental requests, we shore up those funds' budgets through a transfer from the general fund. So the library and senior services would be two funds where if you see supplemental requests, we would need to increase transfers from the general fund in order to cover them. We don't have any supplemental requests for the senior services fund, but we do have one for the library. I also want to point out that that library supplemental is currently built into the adjusted base budget. That was an oversight. It is not supposed to be in both places. So you currently have an adjusted base budget with a little over $104,000 in the library materials increase in the adjusted base, and a supplemental request for the same thing. So should you choose to not move forward the supplemental request into the adjusted base or into the final budget for the library, there'd be a reduction in the general fund transfer of about $104,000. That was a lot. If there's any questions, let me know.
Thank you. I can't help but notice the book that you have in front of you, The Money Tree. I got one of those from my father when I was about 10 years old, but it only had one page in it, and it was said, "Get a job." I think the rest of this board also probably got a similar copy of that book. So anyways, just trying to make a little levity in what we have to discuss today. So anyways, okay, so Ms. Willoughby.
Thank you, Terry Willoughby, for the record. We're going to turn it to start looking at supplementals. And I did want to remind the board that there is no money tree, that we do have limited resources. And this was a gift from our county engineer, Jeremy Hutchings, to me. And I really appreciate it. And so I wanted to bring it forward and use it today to remind everybody we do have limited resources, and we are, especially in the general fund, remember your priorities when you're looking at these supplemental requests. And also remember that we do have labor negotiations with two groups coming forward, DC SPA, Sheriff's Protective Association, and the Sergeant's Bargaining Unit. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cates for his review and ranking of the supplementals.
Okay. For the record, Patrick Cates. So I took the supplemental request sheets and what's the matter? Oh, sorry. It's up there, right? Everybody can see that. Okay.
So, Mr. Cates, if I could interrupt you for just a second.
Yes, sir.
Questions by the board, do you wish to hold those until the end, or do you wish to have those as we go through each item?
Maybe hold them to the end. I think I'll be pretty brief, going through the recommendations that I gave, and then we can talk about all of them at your leisure.
Okay, thank you.
So starting with general fund, I try to put a priority ranking on these based on available funding. Some of them I'm recommending for funding, some of them I'm not due to insufficient funds. I just want to briefly touch on these, and then as I said, we can go through and talk about them in more detail. So there's approximately $3.5 million in general fund available at the start of this process. The first two items we talked about on Monday, and you approved moving forward with those. The pay plan adjustment, that's about $2.5 million impact to the general fund, as well as the $100,000 one-time expense for the class and comp study. So I figured those were priorities 1 and 2. They're critical need across the organization, as we talked about on Monday. The next item that I prioritized was a sheriff's sergeant. This is a new position that would replace the constable. As you know, the constable's retiring, and you've already taken action to eliminate that office. So that'll allow the sheriff to absorb that function. The next item is a comprehensive trails plan update. I think this is an important community priority. Our current plan is woefully out of date, and having an up-to-date plan will make us more competitive for future grants. Next item on my list is the transfer of development rights study. I think this is also an important priority to preserve open space. Our TDR program has been successful to preserve open space in this community, which I know is a high value of this community, as talked about in the master plan. It's time to take a look at that and make sure that it functions as intended going into the future. Next item on the list, one-time expense for transportation model update with Campo. Our current transportation model is significantly out of date. If I recall, it's about 7 years out of date, and that doesn't reflect current conditions. Campo, the timing with Campo is good because they want to do a regional traffic study, so that would be a component of that. So I think it's very timely that we proceed with that and that be funded. Next item on the prioritized list is Deputy Clerk Coordinator for Elections. I don't need to tell you the things that the Nevada Legislature has done related to elections, and it's having a significant impact on our Clerk Treasurer. Next, two items relate to the Sheriff, an increase to the Marine budget, as well as replacement of radios. I think those are both critical to public safety. Next item on the list is a weed control maintenance specialist. This was the combining of 3 seasonals into 1 full-time FTE, full-time equivalent position. Scott Morgan spoke about this during his presentation. It's a minimal cost, and I think it's a common sense reorg to help maintain services for that critical program. And then the next 2 items relate to replacing equipment for the weed control program. Obviously, if they don't have trucks and spray units, it's more difficult for them to do their job. Next item on the list was the court IT technician. It was very concerning. Of course, you heard the presentation from the Judicial Department that they only have 1 person that handles IT. I think that's a significant cybersecurity risk with a single point of failure, and they definitely need some help in that arena. Next item on the list is the Technology Services System Administrator. The workload demands on our technology services department are significant, and that's detailed in their request. I think it's important that to supply critical IT infrastructure to all the departments. So that's a point of failure that impacts everybody. Next item is the Assistant Court Administrator. Of course, you heard the presentation from the Judicial Branch. I think they made a good argument for why they need that based on workload. And likewise, a Deputy Clerk Treasurer, half-time position, also due to workload demands. And that brings me to the next page. This is still general fund. There were 3 items that I'm not recommending for funding at this time. The first one is the update to the Tahoe area plans. While I do think that is important, that there is a need there, we don't have sufficient funding. And I'm a little bit concerned about workload for community development because there are other items on here that we have asked to be funded. If it's important to the board, we could consider looking at greater than anticipated fund balance at the close of the current fiscal year as a possible funding for that. Next item was a request from community development for a GIS analyst. Again, I think it's a need. I think it would have benefit to the community, but we don't have sufficient funding at this time. And that's an ongoing cost, so I would not recommend that be considered out of greater than anticipated balance. The next item, this relates to what Jenny was talking about. I actually moved this from the original sheet for library materials because this would be a transfer from the general fund. I'm not recommending funding for that. As she talked about, that there was a duplication that it's already included in the base budget. If there is a need for that, that's something they could consider from their PALS tax, greater than anticipated fund balance if needed. I'll briefly touch on the other funds, the special revenue funds and enterprise funds. I did not put any priority ranking on these. I think they are all well justified. And of course, each fund has its own funding source and balances, so there's no sense in prioritizing them one against the other. And that, Mr. Chairman, concludes my overview. I'm happy to talk through any of that.
And Terry Willoughby for the record. For the special remaining special revenue requests and enterprise funds and other funds, there is sufficient funding to cover all those. So, And you may notice on the supplemental request, there was one from finance for a management analyst, and I withdrew that request yesterday. Because we don't have I have no space for them.
To give the board some time to digest this.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question, please?
Mr. Tarkanian.
I know yesterday we talked about the $100,000 class and comp study plan, and that was voted for already. I'm not sure if we need to vote for that again, but as I mentioned, I was against that, thinking we could do that in-house and save $100,000. I had a question, though, on the other two. The comprehensive trails plan update, is that something that could be done in-house? And same with the transfer development rights study. It looks like there's, well, no, then there's another transportation model update with Campo. So there's actually $400,000 in study plans. I just wanted to see what the county could and couldn't do, and from your opinion.
For the record, Patrick Cates, particularly the transfer of development rights study, that would be a very involved study. And the staffing for community development is very thin right now. They have vacancies in planning. It would take away from existing operations, and they're frankly barely staying afloat with the workload as they have it now.
Ask you something real quick before you get to the next one. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you said they're short of staffing. Is that shortage of staffing part of the budget we have now, or is the full staffing or a higher percentage of the staffing included in the budget now? Because maybe some of the savings from the current staffing could be used for this.
Terry Willoughby, for the record, they have had vacancies and salary savings that we're hoping that they'll be able to hire with the pay plan adjustment that was approved by the board this week. We're hoping that will be helpful to the departments. And they're budgeted at 100% with all these positions, and then we do include a vacancy factor as an adjustment against that. So we could bring this back if there were sufficient salary savings to later in the year.
So you're saying you can bring it back and possibly use some of the salary savings for this $100,000 report that's going to be done?
Terry Willoughby, for the record, right now, because we have brought the COLA that was budgeted in 22-23, and we're doing it this fiscal year, I would have to look and see if there's sufficient salary savings this current year. But I can certainly review that.
Mr. Tarkanian, you have extremely good eyes, because those are the notes that I had here also. There have been times in the last year I thought you were reading from my notes, but hey. So I also recognize the idea or the concept of spending. I know that I once again, on that class and comp study, I said that we are in a no-win situation there, and I still support that concept. Is that if we have staff do it, we're going to get members of the public that are going to say that it's a biased report, and other members of the community are saying, why are we spending that money? But I see the other three studies. That's $300,000, and I'm just I'm wondering if those are absolutely critical to us. Sometimes we do studies and we don't really get any action out of those studies, and so or something that we can take action on. So, while I understand the open space is critical to our community, and I realize that we are understaffed there. So. But I also question that particular one. I understand the need for the comprehensive trails plan update for the possibility of future grants, and also the transportation model update also that would help us with future grants. And I don't know that we have staff that can accomplish either one of those, but I'm not sure about this transfer of development rights. That is a high priority for me, and I don't want to make any light of that one, especially when it comes to, I really don't believe that when the original master plan was developed in 1996, that there was any comprehension that we would even consider moving transfer development rights from one watershed to another. But I don't know that that is a element that's involved now, because the receiving area from the TRE area up to the Minden area has been granted by a previous board, and I don't know that we have development rights that are necessarily available down in South County in that watershed any longer. So I'm just curious about. I'm not comfortable necessarily with that particular expenditure, but that's me and that's my feelings. But I'd like to hear from the rest of the members of the board on that also. But otherwise, I didn't have any other questions on the other items here. So, did I interrupt somebody though when they were going to say something there?
For the record, Patrick Cates, I would emphasize what you just touched on, particularly for the transportation model update and the comprehensive trails plan. It will make us more competitive for grant funding, and we're in a unique situation right now with the infrastructure bill that's come out that'll be spent over the next few years. And I think having an updated transportation model is going to help us get transportation funding through that, as well as for trails. And without having those plans, we have weaker applications. I mean, we'd be submitting applications for trails with a plan that is 7 years old.
I understand that. The question is, could we do it in-house as opposed to not having to hire out? That was my question.
I don't think we have the staffing levels to do them in-house. The transportation model, you're talking about John Erb and his shop. He is little more than a one-man man. He has a very limited crew under him. A lot of them are road crew type people. And we just don't have that expertise. And what you really gain with somebody that's an outside contractor that specializes in this is a lot of breadth of knowledge that we don't have, and they know how things are done in other jurisdictions, and they can bring that knowledge to bear, and I think you get a much better product in the long run.
And Terry Willoughby, for the record, also, outside consultants often have a very good pulse on what the grantors are looking for in the grant applications, so they could tailor some of that information to potential grants. And I wanted to provide some background on the recreational trails program was funded through the infrastructure bill recently, and there are billions of dollars funded in that infrastructure bill specifically for trail maintenance and trails. So good chance for us.
Mr. Ingalls.
By having a third party be involved in this, we have more objectivity rather than doing it in-house, which can become distorted sometimes. Thank you.
If I may just make one general comment about making us more competitive for grants. One of my priorities for this county is to bring in more grant funding. I think we bring in a woefully limited amount of grant funding, and there's a lot more funding that's available out there. That's why we've been aggressively pursuing this. That's why we requested, and you guys funded a grant administrator last budget cycle. That's why we want these plans up to date. That's why we're looking at being able to track volunteer time to count that as in-time match. One of my duties at the state was being responsible for the grants office and very involved in increasing the level of grant funding for the state, and I want to do the same thing for Douglas County, and this is a piece of that.
So the observation I would make is that we have an item on page 3. I think it's page 3, page 2, a community development engineering, community development GIS analyst for basically $100,000. And so I'm just questioning whether or not it would be better to spend $100,000 and you indicate on there needed but insufficient funding. So I'm just wondering if it would be wiser to move that $100,000 off of that TDR area and move it over to that individual that community development could use. So,
Terry Willoughby, for the record, that, I believe that's the same position. It's split among different funds. So we could look at just allocating it across the other funds and not the general fund, based on the duties of the position.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow you on that. What are you, the 100 grand for the TDR study or the 100 grand
Oh,
for
for
the
the person, the
for the
position.
person? Okay. Mr. Cates, what do you, I'd like to get your ideas on what I just said in regards to that.
I think it's a value judgment. I think they're both important. I think to me, the transfer of development rights is a broader issue that how do I say this? I think it's a more critical issue for the broader community that we preserve our open space and that we take a careful look at that as part of our review as Title 20, and I think that should be the next priority. But they're both valued, so either way the board wants to go on that, I think is reasonable.
Terry Willoughby, for the record, I did find the amount. So it's included in the infrastructure bill is the 5-year reauthorization of federal surface transportation programs, AKA trails, which contains $550 billion in new spending. It's to make transformative policy changes to create accountability and for new trails.
Did I hear that right? 550 billion?
Mr. Nosat, any questions? Mr. Turkanian? No? Anything, any additional comments, Mr. Engels? Mr. Rice? Okay. So what, are you looking for action on this? You're looking for action on this particular item?
Terry Willoughby, for the record, we would be looking at what the board wants to include in the final budget for supplementals. Of course, if we find sometimes between tentative and final, we look at revenue sources, something comes to light that we missed, and we may be able to fund something that's not recommended here, but we would like to know what the board wants to include in the final budget from the supplemental requests.
So we'd be returning on May, what was the date?
Terry Willoughby, for the record, that the plan is now to bring it to the second board meeting in May as part of the regular board meeting for the final budget.
Right, so if you can vote on this, give us some direction, we'll have that prepared that way, and you have an opportunity to make adjustments if you would like in May.
Okay, so if we're going to take action on this as we go forward, then we will need to go to public comment on this particular action, this piece of the pie, so to speak. Correct? Right, okay. So then, sensing no other questions or comments from the board, I will go to public comment at this time on this particular item. Is there any public comment here in chambers? Seeing no public comment in regards to this item. In regards to this particular item.
In regards to this particular item.
Okay, thank you.
Jason Garrett on the behalf of the House of Gibson, Council and Assembly. With a background in public opinion, market research, social networking, access television, there's a lot of folks out there that are feeling like they're not being heard. They need an opportunity to voice their opinions. I know that there's been a great deal of transparency that the county has offered to bring people into discussion and to be encouraged to be properly informed about these expenditures and the direction the county's taking with the tax base. So we just want to put out there that we're here to help you in terms of any kind of public opinion polls, market research, community communication, social networking, these kinds of things that would draw people into some kind of open dialogue. They say the more you know, the less you show. So we have to kind of disarm each other in a sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Since no other public comment here in chambers, Mrs. Johnson, is there any public comment online?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marcia Johnson for the record. At this time, there is no public comment online.
I wonder if everybody's awake yet. Okay, then I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion and a possible motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm searching for the proper motion to make. My assumption is that we would be making a motion to accept the supplemental budget request recommendations of the county manager as presented. I make that motion.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Rice, seconded by Commissioner Engels to accept the supplemental budget request as presented by the county manager with the priority items as listed regarding the tentative budget for March 8 from fiscal year 22-23 general fund. Any further discussion? Sensing no further discussion, all those? No, I'm sorry. We're in taking action at this point in time. So at this time, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 5-0. So. Mr. Garrett, when we're actually, once we've closed public comment and brought it back to the board, then we've shut off public comment. So I appreciate your desire to say something, but we can't do that at that point in time. So thank you. We had a 5-0 vote to accept the county manager's recommendations in regards to the prioritization of $3.5.27.115 out of our general fund into the supplemental budget requests. That's what we did. What's that? That decision has been made by this board. Yes, that's correct. That will go into the tentative budget, and then the Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Willoughby, will bring back the final budget to us for approval. So there will be additional discussion when that occurs, when that action occurs. This board will have an opportunity to review all of these items once again and make our final decision in regards to our budget for 22-23. Yes. Yeah. So anyways, I understand, Mr. Rice, but I'm just trying to answer a member of the public's here the first time. So I want to, yes. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a quick statement?
Yes,
When
Mr.
you say that this was a consensus 5-0, I had voted against the $100,000 plan for the salaries yesterday. I don't agree with it today, but I voted for it because it was approved yesterday.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes. Okay, I guess we're ready to proceed with the next item.
Terry Willoughby for the record. At this point, we are ready for you to approve the tentative budget as presented over the last 3 days. Again, this will come back to you again in May for a final vote. It will be submitted to the state by April 15th as our tentative budget. And if there's any follow-up questions, we can certainly look at those now. Otherwise, you're free to vote to approve the budget as presented.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cates.
just a point of clarification for the record. I understood the motion that you just approved to include supplemental requests for the general fund, special revenue, and enterprise funds. Is that correct?
That was my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, and obviously it didn't include the 3 items that were on page 2. Right. Okay. Okay, basically then, is there any further discussion by the board on the tentative budget as presented by the Chief Financial Officer, Terry Willoughby? Sensing no other discussion by the board, I will then open this to public comment. So at this time, we will take public comment from chambers on the on this particular The proposed budgets, okay. So is there any other further public comment?
You have to pardon me, counsel. This is a very complex situation, and I'm not sure if I gleaned any kind of flow chart or any kind of schematic online. There's a lot of information that's online. So that I don't waste your time or offend anybody, it'd be helpful to have some idea as to how this process occurs so that we can offer meaningful comment or assistance in shaping the future of the county. I think there's a lot of people that perhaps are perplexed with the complexity of these budgets and these numbers. We're certainly challenged with a sense of attention deficit disorder today. And that time is money disease, that memory virus, well, people can't remember much, you see. So if we can be of a service or assistance in bringing about an understanding as to how this budget is engineered, then we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. I appreciate your concerns. On our Monday session, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Willoughby and Ms. Cartwright took us through the flow chart on exactly the processes that takes place in our county in regards to building the budgets. So that would probably be part of the presentation. I'm sorry, you've had your public comment. I'm just trying to answer your question here. That would be part of the presentation that's online with Ms. Willoughby's presentation to this board on Monday of the budget process in the county. So that is available, as I understand it. Am I correct, Ms. Willoughby?
Terry Willoughby for the record. Yes, it was part of the packet on Monday. I will make sure it's also on the finance website, available for the public. And as always, if a member of the public wishes to discuss the budget process, I'm available. So.
And I also knew that of your office as well. You're very transparent and very forthcoming with the public, so
Terry
we
Willoughby,
appreciate
fun
that.
fact that the number on the finance website is my direct line. So if you call finance, you get to talk to me.
Thank you, Ms. Willoughby. Since no other public comment here, Ms. Johnson, is there public comment online?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marcia Johnson for the record. At this time, there's no public comment online.
Okay, so then at this point in time, I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion and a possible motion to approve the tentative budget as presented. Any other discussion? Since no other discussion, I will entertain a motion to approve the tentative budget as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the tentative budget as presented.
Okay. Second. Okay, motion by Commissioner Rice, seconded by Commissioner Ingalls to approve the tentative budget as presented. Sensing no other discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Does that mean that barring final public closing comment today, we are done?
Terry Willoughby, for the record, yes, we are done. We will be taking back your comments and working on the state forms, which are very manual. We have to submit them to the state by April 15th. But thank you I thank the board for all your support and patience as we go through the process. I appreciate it. And a special thank you to Jenny Cartwright, my finance manager, who did all the detail work on this, and I couldn't have done it without her. And the board's support in helping me to reorganize my department a couple years ago.
Thank you, Ms. Willoughby, and once again, I congratulate you on the job that you guys do. And it's never ceases to amaze me how so on top of things, when we have a question by this board, regardless of what it is, you seem to have that answer at the tip of your fingers, or you find it for us in a very short period of time. So we appreciate that as well. So at this time, we will go into closing public comment. So closing public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Board of County Commissioners, or those agenda items where public comment has not already been taken. So once again, this is an opportunity for the public to come forward and offer closing public comment. And Mr. Garrett.
I'd just like to remind the board that we have a deficit spending model that's out of control. Majority of our budget resources are allocated towards the militarization of law enforcement, towards education, which is insufficient, towards
Mr.
big-
Garrett, I don't wish to be inconsiderate of your action or your thoughts. However, we do not operate at a deficit. We are not allowed to operate as a deficit by the county, and so I'm asking you to keep your comments to within the jurisdiction of this board. We don't have any control of the federal budget or even the state budget. So we are required by Nevada revised statutes to operate within our means here in the county, and we must present a balanced budget to the state, if I'm not mistaken. So we cannot do any deficit spending in this county, and we are operating within the resources that are within this county. So do you have any public comment that refers to this specific budget and our particular operations of the county?
Sure. The spending model is based on a belief that time is money, and a majority of people who are on the clock in the calendar working 8 hours a day are burned out. They're tired. They want a different working model, a different organizational principle. So the belief that time is money and the biggest complaint that there's not enough time or money is rooted in a fundamental error in the organizational principle and the administration of resources, which is why we refer you back to the discovery of the law of time at lawoftime.org to make conscious what's unconscious so that we can have a real sense of surety and peace as we move forward into the future. We see a small budget item for the peace plan or the Peace Through Culture program, but the majority of these resources are being thrown at more technology, more utility, and a jumbo-sized government that cannot be sustained. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. So, Ms. Nalder, good to see you this morning.
Good morning. Jen Nalder, Program Director for Main Street, Gardnerville. Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. I wanted to commend you, first of all, for running such an efficient tentative budget hearings. This has been really interesting to watch, and I think that you've gone through everything with a lot of thoughtfulness, and so I want to, first of all, commend you for that. I wanted to thank Mr. Cates and Ms. Willoughby and Ms. Cartwright, and of course, Lisa, for bringing forward these supplemental budget items. Of course, I'm going to be a big champion for the Main Street program, but the other programs that you are tentatively approving are going to be really impactful to the community. The trails, the arts, and of course, our Main Street program. I don't know if you're aware, but we are the only Nevada nationally accredited Main Street program, which is really exceptional. So we have other pockets of communities within Nevada that look to us as to how we build our model with working with a small organization and our municipalities to make things happen on our streets. So we have people such as Ely, Eureka, White Pine that take after us and look to us and seek our advice on how to establish these. Everybody loves a vibrant downtown, and we love our flower baskets. We love our little pedal pushers who go and make sure that it's beautiful when we drive down the streets. And it may not mean a lot, but what it brings to your community is a sense of a downtown that's vibrant, and people want to live here, and we want to stay here, and other bigger businesses, not just our Main Street businesses. They are bringing people in that look at our Main Streets and they love it. These kind of partnerships that we have, not just with Main Street, but Carson Valley, the Carson Valley Arts Council and the Carson Valley Trails, we're able to do the legwork for you because we are volunteer-based. Main Street is, I am the only paid position here. We are 99% volunteers. We are able to bring our community in to build it how we want. So I just have to send you my gratitude to everybody that put these together, because you're really helping us to build a beautiful community. So thank you.
Thank you. Even though your time hasn't expired, you can keep complimenting us if you wish. I mean, we have plenty of time for
That's
that.
all
We
you
we
get.
don't hear that too often. So if you would just want to keep going, I'll give you extra time actually if you need it. So we appreciate that, Ms. Nalder, and we appreciate the job you do with Main Street Gardnerville. And I'll promote one of your items. I believe it's on May 22nd. May 19th is the first wine walk. No, I was talking about the Jazz Festival. The Jazz Festival, May 22nd, right? Yes, yes. Okay. Looking forward to it. What time does that start? Noon to when the crowd dissipates. Or you run out of wine or whatever, whichever. Okay. So, and the first wine walk is again what date?
Right after your budget meeting, you guys will need it, so I'll see you on
What, is there any reason, I mean, you do understand why we move the meetings to 10 o'clock in the morning now? Okay, okay, thank you. Yes, we don't often get compliments, so it's nice always to hear that. Sensing no other people who wish to come up and compliment us today here in Chambers, I'll see if we have anybody online that maybe want to compliment us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marcia Johnson for the record. At this time, there's no public comment online.
Darn, I was hoping. Okay. With that, gentlemen, that's it. And when I attended a function yesterday, actually a good governance group, I went by there yesterday after our meeting, and I told people that if they were anticipating coming to our meeting on Thursday, that they could take that out of their plans, because I didn't think we were going to be meeting on Thursday, and as it turns out, it's not required. Is that right, Ms. Willoughby? Okay, so we have no meeting tomorrow, and so at this time, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you for your attention.